At first, it feels like any other backyard family gathering. A grill hissing softly, paper plates stacked too high, someone laughing in the middle of a sentence because the joke barely lands before the next one replaces it. A cousin raises a drink and smirks, pointing across the yard. "Who gave you that call sign?" he asks, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Did you make it up yourself?" Laughter spreads quickly, the easy kind that doesn't think before it reacts. And then something changes. Not in the laughter, not in the music, not even in the voice telling the joke again, but on one face the camera would never normally focus on. His father, a man who hasn't flinched at fireworks, storms, or bad news for years. A former Navy SEAL who suddenly stops moving, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the ground. Because there are some call signs you don't joke about. Before we go deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The man everyone is laughing at is named Evan, mid-30s, quiet, the type who helps clear plates without being asked. He didn't even choose to wear the old baseball cap that day, the one with faded stitching and a single word embroidered on the side. Someone noticed it, someone always does, and that's how this started. To most people, a call sign sounds like a nickname, something playful, something earned through a prank or a mistake. That's how it looks from the outside. Evan smiles politely, the way you do when you don't want to explain your whole life over a paper cup of soda. Inside, his chest tightens. He hears his cousin's voice echo, feels the heat rise in his neck, and he glances, just once, toward his father. That's when he sees it. The stillness. The look that says, without words, this is not a joke. Have you ever been in a room where everyone else is laughing, and you suddenly realize you're standing on a line no one warned you about? Evan's father, Michael, hasn't talked much about his service since retiring. He tells safe stories. Training was hard. The guys were close. He changes the subject when questions get specific. What most people don't know is that call signs aren't chosen for fun. They come from moments that stick, moments that follow you long after the uniform is folded away. Evan grew up hearing radios crackle late at night, smelling oil and metal on his father's clothes when he came home. He learned early not to ask certain questions. 6 months before this family gathering, Evan finally did. They were alone in the garage, rain tapping against the roof, and Evan held up the cap. "Dad," he asked quietly, "why does this one bother people?" Michael didn't answer right away. He sat down on an overturned bucket, rubbed his hands together, and said, "Because it belongs to someone who didn't come back." The story Michael told that night wasn't dramatic in the way movies make it. It was practical. A dusty road. A routine operation. A teammate named Ryan, steady, reliable, the kind of man who checked everyone else's gear before his own. Ryan's call sign was the same one stitched on Evan's cap. It came from a moment when Ryan stayed behind so others could move forward, a decision made in seconds that carried weight forever. When things went wrong, Ryan did exactly what he'd always done. He held the line. Michael's voice broke once, just once, when he said, "We promised his name wouldn't disappear." After Ryan's death, the team agreed that his call sign would never be reassigned. It would be spoken carefully, if at all. Years later, when Evan enlisted, Michael hesitated. But Evan earned it, not as a replacement, but as a reminder. How do you think it would feel to carry a name that heavy, knowing the story behind it? Back in the backyard, the laughter fades into something awkward. Evan's cousin senses the shift and clears his throat. "I was just kidding," he says, softer now. Evan nods, because explaining would take too long and hurt too much. Michael finally looks up. His voice is calm, but it carries. "That call sign," he says, "isn't a joke." The yard goes quiet. Someone sets a plate down. A child asks a question that no one answers. Michael doesn't give details. He doesn't need to. The weight in his words is enough. Later that evening, as the sun dips low and people begin to leave, the cousin finds Evan by the fence. "I didn't know," he says. Evan shrugs. Most people don't. They stand there for a moment, listening to the distant sound of traffic, the smell of charcoal still in the air. It's an ordinary ending to an ordinary day, except it isn't. Because now everyone who heard that exchange will remember it. And maybe they'll think twice before laughing. If this were your family, your history, your loss, how would you want others to treat it? Within that family, power has always spoken loudly. It belongs to the cousin who fills every room with his voice, who tells stories with his hands, who interrupts without apology and is rewarded with laughter for it. He's the one people expect to hear from. Across from him, almost invisible by comparison, is Claire. She sits slightly turned away from the noise, watching more than talking, registering the shifts in tone before anyone else notices them. Over the years, the family has decided who she is without ever asking her. Serious, private, a little intense. The labels come easily, casually, the way people name things they don't understand. No one knows why she keeps her answers short, why she lets conversations move past her without pushing back. They assume it's personality. They never consider history. They don't see the way her fingers tighten around a glass when certain jokes land too close, or how her eyes flick to her father's face before she reacts. She has learned that restraint is safer than explanation, that silence draws less attention than truth. Inside, Claire's mind is anything but quiet. She notices how praise flows toward the loudest voice, how interruptions are forgiven when they come from the right person, how confidence is mistaken for authority. She remembers being younger, trying once to explain why certain comments felt wrong, only to be told she was overthinking, that she should lighten up. After that, she stopped trying, not because she had nothing to say, but because she understood the cost. Silence, she realized, could be a shield. It allowed her to observe, to measure people without revealing herself. And so when the cousin mocks the call sign, when laughter ripples without pause, she doesn't flinch outwardly. She studies the reactions instead. Who laughs too quickly? Who hesitates? Who notices her father go still? In moments like this, people reveal more than they intend. They thought silence meant weakness. They mistook her restraint for submission. But what if quiet is not the absence of strength, but the place where it's stored, waiting for the right moment to surface? What starts as a single joke doesn't stay small for long. The cousin repeats it, louder this time, polishing the timing, adding a smirk like he's discovered something clever. A few others join in, feeding off the rhythm of it, each repetition earning another burst of laughter. The call sign is no longer a question. It becomes a punchline, something to toss around casually, stripped of context, stripped of weight. Claire remains still. She doesn't laugh it off, doesn't offer a half smile to ease the moment. She doesn't correct him. She doesn't explain. To anyone watching closely, her body tells a different story. Her posture stays upright, almost formal. Her breathing is slow, deliberate, measured in a way that suggests practice. There's no emotional leakage, no visible crack. She looks like someone who has learned how to hold a line without drawing attention to it. People assume she's unaffected. They're wrong. Across the yard, her father watches everything. Not the cousin's performance, but Claire. He notices the control, the discipline in her stillness, and his expression shifts. He isn't amused. He isn't angry, not yet. What settles on his face is concern, the kind that comes from recognition. He's seen this before, not in backyards, but in briefings and quiet moments before things changed forever. The cousin says the call sign again, stretching it out for effect, and something clicks in the father's mind. The name doesn't just sound unusual. It sounds familiar. Too familiar. A memory stirs, uninvited, bringing with it a place, a voice, a promise made years ago. And that's when he realizes the name carries a history no one here is prepared to hear. If you were in that crowd, would you notice the shift, or would you keep laughing, unaware of the line you were crossing? The shift finally comes from her father, and it's almost easy to miss. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't step forward. He simply asks, quietly, "Where did you hear that call sign?" The question lands differently than the jokes did. Laughter doesn't stop all at once, but it thins, like air slowly leaking from a room. A few people glance at each other. Someone clears their throat. The cousin chuckles, sensing attention slipping, and decides to push harder. He waves a hand dismissively, says it sounds fake, says it's probably something she presumed Ed to seem interesting. Then he turns toward Claire, eyes bright with challenge, and dares her to explain. The invitation hangs there, sharp and exposed. She could speak. She could end it. But she doesn't. She stays silent. The quiet that follows is heavy, deliberate. Plates clink as someone nervously shifts their grip. The grill sizzles, a steady sound that suddenly feels too loud. No one rushes in to fill the gap. Claire's face remains composed, her breathing controlled, her gaze steady but distant. To those who don't understand, it looks like hesitation. To her father, it looks like restraint honed over time. He recognizes the choice she's making, the discipline it takes to hold back when every instinct urges defense. Silence, in moments like this, isn't emptiness. It's a boundary. It forces others to sit with their own words, to hear the echo of what they've said. Because silence, when you understand it, can be louder than shouting. And in that space, something irreversible begins to form. Years earlier, Long before this backyard and these voices, Claire lived in a very different rhythm. The days were structured down to the minute, mornings beginning before the sun fully decided to rise. The air smelled of metal and dust, and every sound carried meaning. There was no room for guessing, no space for ego. Instructions were given once, expected to be understood the first time. Mistakes weren't dramatic, they were costly, and everyone knew it. In that environment, no one cared how loud you were at a family gathering or how quickly you could make people laugh. What mattered was whether you showed up prepared, whether your hands stayed steady under pressure, whether you could be trusted when things became uncertain. Claire learned early that attention wasn't safety. Precision was. She didn't arrive with confidence on display. She earned it quietly, through consistency, by listening more than she spoke, by noticing details others missed. Respect came not because she asked for it, but because people learned they could rely on her. There were moments when fear crept in, moments when the weight of responsibility pressed hard against her chest, but she learned how to manage it, how to keep her breathing even, her thoughts clear. In that world, names were not casual. They were not handed out lightly or repeated for effect. They came later, after time had passed, after trust had been tested. And if you survived long enough to get a name, it meant something. It meant you had carried more than yourself, and you had done it without needing applause. The cousin laughs again, unable to let the moment go, and shakes his head as if this is all still harmless. Seriously, he says, pointing toward Claire. Who even gave you that? The sound of his laughter hangs in the air for a second longer than it should. Then her father stands up. There's no rush in the movement, no anger spilling out, just a controlled, deliberate rise to his feet that draws every eye without him asking for it. His face is calm in a way that feels colder than shouting ever could. He looks at the cousin, steady and unblinking, and says, "Say it again." The yard goes still. Even the cousin hesitates now, unsure why his confidence is faltering, unsure why repeating a joke suddenly feels like a test he might fail. As the name is spoken again, something settles firmly into place for her father. He doesn't need to ask more questions. He recognizes it, not from stories, not from rumors, but from a setting most people never know exists. A list that isn't written down, a record that doesn't live in public spaces. A name used only in environments where precision matters and anonymity is survival. His expression doesn't change, but his focus sharpens. He understands now why Claire never explained, why she never laughed, why she let silence do the work. Because the only people who had that name weren't civilians. And the realization shifts the balance of the entire room. Her father turns to her, and when he speaks now, his voice is different. Not sharp, not demanding. It carries the quiet authority of someone who understands exactly what he's asking and why it matters. He poses a simple question, one that sounds ordinary to anyone else listening. Claire answers just as simply. Her words are brief, precise, formal. No extra detail, no explanation offered. The exchange lasts only seconds, but it changes everything. The cadence, the restraint, the clarity in her responses are unmistakable to anyone who knows what to listen for. This is not someone improvising a story. This is someone responding from training, from memory, from a place where every word once mattered. Around them, people begin to notice the shift without fully understanding it. Conversations stop restarting. Laughter doesn't return. Postures adjust, shoulders straightening, bodies turning toward the exchange as if pulled by gravity. The cousin, who moments ago owned the space, grows quieter. His smile fades into something uncertain. He looks from Claire to her father and back again, sensing that he has stepped into a room he doesn't have access to. Claire never raises her voice. She never claims authority or corrects anyone. She doesn't need to. Power isn't something she reaches for. It's something that's recognized, slowly and unmistakably, by those who know what it looks like. The truth comes out carefully, measured in fragments rather than stories. Her father doesn't offer a speech, and Claire doesn't volunteer one. Just enough is said to settle the question without feeding curiosity. The call sign wasn't a nickname. It was issued. It came from a joint environment where roles overlapped and standards were unforgiving, where names were chosen by people who didn't joke and didn't repeat themselves. No one says when. No one says where. The details remain sealed by the way they're spoken, and by the way they're not. That restraint says more than any explanation could. The space around them feels heavier now, like everyone senses they're standing at the edge of something they're not meant to step into. Her father adds only one sentence, and he delivers it without emphasis. I trained with people who'd only used that name once. Then he stops. The silence that follows isn't awkward. It's final. There's no gloating, no correction, no attempt to reclaim the moment. Claire stands exactly as she has the entire time, composed and unremarkable to anyone who still doesn't understand what they've just heard. Across from her, Brian's expression changes as recognition finally settles in. He realizes, too late, that the laughter was misplaced, that the performance was built on ignorance. And that's when Brian understands he's been laughing at the wrong person. The energy never fully returns after that. Brian tries to recover, tossing out a few lighter jokes, testing the room the way he always has, but they land without weight. The timing is off. The laughter doesn't follow. People busy themselves instead, checking phones, adjusting chairs, finding reasons to look anywhere but at him. Eye contact becomes something everyone seems to avoid, as if acknowledging what just happened would require questions they don't want to ask. The hierarchy that felt so stable an hour ago has quietly shifted, and no one is quite sure where they stand now. Nothing dramatic happens. No confrontation, no raised voices. Just a slow, unmistakable change in how the space feels. Claire doesn't say anything to claim the moment. She doesn't correct assumptions or clarify details. She doesn't need to. She stands there the same way she always has, unchanged, steady, unbothered on the surface. Inside, there's a quiet release, not triumph, but relief. The weight she's carried into this gathering, the unspoken judgment, eases slightly. She never wanted attention or validation. She never needed to be seen. She just needed the laughter to stop, the misunderstanding to end. And in that stillness, without demanding it, she finally gets what she's been carrying all along. Later, away from the edges of the backyard and the lingering chatter, her father finds a moment alone with Claire. No questions, no explanations, no need to justify what just happened in front of everyone else. He speaks softly, not out of curiosity, but out of respect, a respect that comes from recognition of experience, of restraint, of endurance. Their eyes meet, and in that brief exchange, there is understanding. Mutual, silent, complete. It's a moment that doesn't require words beyond the ones spoken. It carries everything unspoken between them, a bond formed in shared knowledge and quiet acknowledgement. And in that quiet, a lesson lingers beyond the gathering, beyond the laughter that's long since faded. Some strength stays quiet, almost invisible to the casual observer. Some authority doesn't announce itself, but when it's recognized, it changes the room, the people, the energy, without needing to shout. Claire doesn't claim power. She doesn't need to. And in her silence, in her composure, the meaning of her presence becomes undeniable. The cousin never apologizes. Not out loud, not in words that reach anyone beyond himself. But the laughter stops, the jokes never return, and the weight of what just happened lingers in the space he once filled so confidently. He's still in the room, still present, but the dynamic has shifted, subtly and permanently. The authority that never raised its voice has spoken. It doesn't need recognition. It doesn't need applause. It simply exists, and the room, the people in it, respond. Not every victory is loud. Some just change the room forever. Have you ever been underestimated, only for the truth to come out later? Tell us in the comments. We'd love to hear your story. And if stories like this stay with you, subscribe. We tell them every week.